You may have heard by now that last week, the main camps at Standing Rock were overrun by colonial capitalist pawns who held men and women at gunpoint in the name of an oil pipeline. Indigenous activists and their allies ceremonially burned structures just before the forced eviction, and dozens were arrested for daring to protect water, land, and human rights. Regardless of what happens now or in the future, Standing Rock has become a beacon for the power of grassroots community building, Indigenous principles, and nonviolent direct action. Indeed, the spirit of Standing Rock can be felt across the world as activists, both Indigenous and non, work together to battle the dirty and destructive forces of capitalism and colonialism. And it is this spirit that Mohawk woman, professor, and filmmaker Paulette Moore has documented in her latest film, Spirit of Standing Rock, released earlier this month. Last week, we sat down and talked with Paulette about her film, the Indigenous approach to community building, tradition, and technology, and the unshakable spirit of Standing Rock. Take a look. Okay, so first of all, talk about your work, because you mentioned it briefly in the documentary, your unique perspective both as a filmmaker and an Indigenous activist.
Yeah, I come from a mainstream media background. I worked a lot with National Geographic and Discovery Channel were my main clients for a long time. And what I started realizing there is that Indigenous people ended up as either backdrops or props, or there was a lot of disrespect that not just Indigenous people, but tribal people, anybody of color. So that really started troubling me. And so started on a path to be kind of aligning with my own culture and my own sense of what justice needs to be. And up here, there was a mining issue where it was going to be the world's largest open pit taconite mine, 22 miles long, 1,000 feet deep, and in the most beautiful wilds. And this is 10% of the world's fresh water right down here in Lake Superior, less than half a mile from me. And behind me over here is the most beautiful wilderness, full of wealth, by the way, full of the wealth of maple trees that can be tapped. And other things that, hunting and fishing. And so what happened here was an amazing Ojibwe-led resistance, but not just resistance, envisioning. So they held a very small version of what's going on out at Standing Rock called Harvest Camp. And the whole point of Harvest Camp was to teach people that there is the wealth of the woods. It was brilliant. It was a really brilliant strategy and worldview and education for people here. And they led this multicultural sort of campaign really for 3 and 4 years that ended up being successful. The mine went away. I mean, it might not be forever. It might be coming back. But in 2015, the mine closed. And so really realizing this like Indigenous voice is bringing us these values that we've lost and these ways of being that are not just sort of esoteric spirituality, but a real map back to being a human being through ceremony, through connection with the land, through gratitude. It's not just this, spirituality. It's really like, oh, this is how we connect with each other.
The sort of tagline for Standing Rock has become water is life, and understanding that it might not be the same for all tribes. Talk about that water and the connection to water, because I feel something in particular that non-Indigenous peoples might not understand, at least not initially, is that sort of connection. And I remember in the film, as the woman is asking permission to come on land, she says that she values the creator first and water second. Talk about that relationship to water.
Well, even in my own Mohawk, Banyan, Gehaga culture, we have what's called the Ohendu Gariwadekwa. And what that is, it's called the words that come before all others. And it's what we are called to do. We are called to be grateful. And we name everything. And one of the first things that we name is the water, because that is the essential, that feeds the land, it feeds the birds, it feeds the trees, it feeds everything. And I think it's just so remarkable that our ancestors were listening so deeply that that's a real again, it's a map for how you keep track of it. Ochinunwa su'a is the bugs. And what if you're looking around and you're saying gratitude for the bugs, but it's like, where are the bees? They're disappearing. It's an actual way to be held responsible for your relatives, which are all human and non-human. And so the water as really this source, and we are made of water, as just the most basic um, being, the most basic relative that we need to take care of. And if we take care of the water, then we take care of everything else. So that's why the water is the most important thing. And truly, like, we are water.
And it's also that sort of that issue of connectivity, that, like you said, like, water feeds the land, it feeds the trees, it feeds the bees, it feeds us, which also means that we are all part of the same stuff that makes all different types of creation. So Standing Rock has become sort of this beacon of community building, and you hear about this a lot inside activism and this need for community building. How and why did that work so well?
I think people's lives are so filled up, um, basically by design. I think that um, people's workplaces are extractive. They expect so much of people's energy, and that's people are really proud. I mean, if people go through the day and ask somebody, how are you doing? Oh, so busy. And if you don't say, oh my god, so busy, people are like, well, don't you have anything to do? Are you worth anything?
Yeah.
And when we are able to step outside of that and put ourselves in the elements, we start wondering where our water is going to come from. We wonder where our food is going to come from. When I was at Standing Rock, one of the most sacred, amazing things that happened is that I was part of a whole massive group of people that butchered a buffalo that the tribe donated because it had been hurt by the herd. And so the tribe, there were two of them actually. And so this is being so connected, like putting your hands on this. Every part of that buffalo was used and distributed, to the camp, and then the hide was used, and the elders were there instructing us what to do with each and every part of the buffalo. So Standing Rock provides this space for people to go and learn and think and imagine. Like, we don't have time within our lives. Every time we turn on the tap, it doesn't allow us to think, what if what was coming out of that tap was either contaminated or it didn't come out of the tap. And these are things that we really need to be seriously thinking about, because all of these communities, Flint, Michigan, people's, the fracking and the, groundwater and the aquifers, our basic sources of water and life, are being destroyed. And those things do not come back. And it's such a death culture to just take it and take it and take it, and even just the other day, I was, eating a meal, and I was kind of standing up and eating it and kind of walking around, and it's like, it's not being respectful to the amount, even like the people who prepared it. And when we're not doing that, then we can go destroy the earth. That's like Myron Dewey says he's a trauma educator. He's he's from Digital Smoke Signals, and he says they don't have the teachings. He had great compassion for DAPL, actually, for the Dakota Access Pipeline workers. He said how would they make that choice, because they were never taught how to care about something, or why. Like, what would be the reason, and where would you get those teachings these days?
Another thing that I found really interesting in the documentary was your mention of the intersection of technology and tradition. And I think that's really fascinating and important because a lot of people, I think, have this idea that indigenous cultures, because of their tradition that is so rooted in the earth, is just this Luddite organization of people that don't have it's like the Amish, but with indigenous people or something. So talk about this intersection of that tradition, like the smudging of the drone, but also this push to be technologically advanced as well.
Yeah, and such a beautiful, really unique indigenous voice that's coming out that has, again, spaces and has like incredible beauty. And indigenous people telling their own story. We're storytellers, and it's what we do. Occupy lived on Twitter, and Standing Rock lives on Facebook because of the Facebook Live. And as a teacher of social media and documentary, I was like, what is that? And it has a lot to do with that storytelling. Like, we need to be able to provide context. And Dallas Goldtooth from Indigenous Environmental Network, that was the first Facebook Live I ever saw, is when he started reporting. And I've told the story, but like at his auntie's house, making dinner, and he's got kids crawling all over. And there's something, again, about that permission of bringing your whole person to what you're doing, and not just be like, shut up, kid, shut up. It's like, this is what's going on. It's messy. We're human beings. And there's something so joyful and liberating about that. And then just the aesthetic beauty of the plains, and, just a few of the artists that are just, wow, amazing. Prolific the Rapper, and Nako Bear and Medicine for the People. Lila June Johnston are all just beautiful artists who have stayed in ceremony within their own the technology and their art.
I'm curious about the hierarchy and how things get done. Because, here it's very obvious. Like, we do things because we're told to do things, and then we go and do them, and then we come back for more orders. And, the issue of flat structure or a more simplistic and equal hierarchy is something that's been coming up in discussions as well. So I'm curious, like, how did that work when Angry Bird said, I want to do this, and this is important to me? Did he have to appeal to elders, or how did things, so to speak, get done at Standing Rock?
That's an amazingly interesting question. Things spring up. There were all these different camps and different people doing things, and it does create tension within the camp. There's a headsman council, and there's the tribe, and all these different entities. A lot of things. I don't know exactly how that came up with Angry Bird, but I do know that he held a meeting and appealed to a group of people and just said, this is what I'm doing. What happens is there's things happening on all fronts. There's the legal, and then the economic sanctions, which have been incredibly successful. So, and people kind of trusting, like, do what you do, Yeah. Everybody doesn't have to go and get shot by rubber bullets, You can go and be in the kitchen, and that's really appreciated. The amazing, beautiful food that sustained people.
So finally, with the documentary, what is your ultimate goal with this? What would you like people to take away from the documentary?
I'm glad you asked that question, because I've been thinking about that a lot. And I had really, as a documentary filmmaker, I had stopped doing narration for a long time on my films. With this documentary, I did narrate it because I want to articulate to people who aren't aware of what the smudge means, or who aren't aware. I think when people see Native people, they think about cartoons. Like, there's no context for people to think about Native people as anything other than one-dimensional, and those one dimensions are cartoons, savages, noble, untouchable, spiritual things, and all of those are so damaging. So I wanted to almost over-explain in some ways. There's a lot of talking in there, and I usually don't like to do that, but I think the audience is people just not used to seeing Native people as complex beings that have these, also just bringing these teachings. I wanted to just stop, like, as things are happening, you see it happen, but I don't want them to go in that space of cartoon, savage. So I want to keep them like, this is why they're smudging, this is why they're drumming, and this is how it could help you. you know? So wanting to, like I said, almost over articulate what we're seeing out there in an attempt to bridge those cultures.
Right. Well, I think that it definitely did that, and again, like it particularly got me thinking about the intention before you do something, like even just sending up a drone for surveillance, like that, the importance of that intention and why they're doing it. I think it was really, that's definitely something that came across in the documentary.
Well, thank you. To experiment with that in my own, with my students here, we give tobacco before we ask somebody for an interview, and then, and sometimes you end up feeling like ridiculous, because it's like you kind of fumble around and it's like, well, what can we do? And it almost feels um, like a show or something. But I think you have to experiment, and you have to, I love seeing the drone being smudged. So you have to allow yourself these spaces to do things differently, because there's not just one way, and the one way that people think there is really not working for us. It's killing us. It's killing our relationships and killing our land. So let's be ridiculous.
Moore's film, The Spirit of Standing Rock, is airing on Free Speech TV. For more information and air times, visit freespeechtv.org.